Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Adjudicator, we are coming from Faculty of Medicine, Sriwijaya University.
With me, Zelka Dapala, majoring in dentistry, intake of 2023 as the first speaker of proposition side.
And I'm Muhammad Iqdal Fadhil Chandra, majoring undergraduate medicine, intake of 2023 as the first speaker on the opposition side.
Let's share our perspective under the motion of, is it fair to castrate the sexual offenders?
I'll start my speech on 3, 2, 1. Panels, we live in a world when every action that we did, we should be responsible for it. Let's talk about the analogical problem under our motion for today. It's about the amount of the sexual harassments that has correlation with the stance of the law itself. What being our problematic and our status quo right now, firstly, is about the amount of the sexual harassment is increasing. Let's see how many thousands per year that that happens in our world. And secondly, we're talking about the victims that mostly is coming from the child and also coming from the teenagers. They exist for the traumatic because they are lack of education of the sexuality itself. And also, let's talk about how the disease, for example, like a spread disease on the sexual, for example, HIV, syphilis, and etc. itself. And thirdly, we're talking about how the lacking of assertive law for the sexual offenders itself. And here, coming to our definitions of the proposition theme, what means of the sexual offenders in our side, we means that it's can be a like immoral action that could be a force for many layers of the society, and also it cause the victims and make disadvantageous for the victim itself. Means that they do the violations of the sexuality laws and they should be punished because of their action. And talking about the castrated in here, what means the castrated in our world? That means that the best punishment of the sexuality laws violations, because we know that from the castrated they will losing the sexual desire and it will be decreasing the sexual harassment cases in our world. And also, we classification the castrated to be a two kind. For example, like a physical castrated and also the chemical castrated. For example, the physical, like they cut off the testicles, or maybe like the chemical castrated, like they use the chemical drugs for, and we will to glorification and the chemical castrated itself. What kind of the functions by doing the castrated? It will be decreasing and then losing the sexual desire from the offenders itself. And here, our stance as the proposition of our burden of proof is very clear. The firstly, we want to prove why the castrated is the best alternative resolving the sexual harassment cases, and it will be fair. And the secondly, we want to prove why the deterrence impact could be appear on our side. By those, we can reach our goals. Firstly, we want to decreasing the amount of sexual harassment cases, and the secondly, the stability and the sustainability the circumstance between people and people will happen to our world. So that's why we provide the mechanism. Firstly, we want to have the report case of the victims as the recapitulation as like usual. And the secondly, we will to convict the offenders to the jail, and after that they will get the first injection of the castrated chemical, and also we give the space time, for example, like 3 months after the injection, and there will be injection of the rotulily again. So that we provide some arguments. Firstly, the victims offenders correlations in the perspective of the impact. Panels, understanding on our urgency right now, firstly, is about the amount of the sexual harassment, and the secondly, about the child abuse by like pedophilia and so on and so forth. And the thirdly, we're thinking about the traumatic and body strike and also the record of the memory coming from the victims itself. What it could be happen, we see the firstly about the weakness of the standing of the law in the country or maybe in the world itself. And the secondly, it's because the offenders thinking about the punishment is so easy, and also if it is they coming from the privileged family, they think, well, I can pay them by the money. That will be the problem will be done, right? And the third, we're thinking about the hypersexual sense of the offenders itself. For example, we're talking the analogical comparison between the victims and the offenders itself. For example, the victims, what they got the traumatic, body strike and memories, and also, for example, the family or maybe like the neighbor, the friends will be judged to them. Meanwhile, in the vice versa, we're thinking about the offenders. It will be not fair if it is they just staying in the jail. They just can replace it with their money. For example, they coming from privileged family. But how to make it fair? In our solutions, we would like to make it be castrated, because we know it will be equal for the victims. They have the body strike, and for the offenders they will have the body strike itself. So for those, we believe the castrated will be the fairest punishment for this case in order to solve the problems of the sexual harassment itself. And the second argument is about appearing the stability of criminal law through the deterrence impact. Panels, understanding our urgency in this current situation. Firstly, it's about the correlations. The high sexual harassment is equal with the decreasing the deterrence impact. they didn't feel any mistake if it is they don't have any deterrence impact and there is no any stance of the law itself, right? So that's why, and the second urgency is about the punishment for sexual case is isn't strict in our world right now. It's just like, oh, the punishment only in the jail, so I can do it in any time. And the thirdly is about the normalizations about the fashion styles of the woman. Many people perspective come into the perspective like, it's normal that she got the sexual harassment because she has their own style like that. But back again, they are victims. You cannot judge the victims in these cases of the law, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why we should have to the alternative of the castrated, because we believe by the castrated it will be decreasing the sexual desire, and also there is not any again like hypersexual sense, and always also decreasing the potential of the victims, and it will be stability is achieved in our side. So that's why deterrence impact is really needed. For example, let's see about the country of Saudi Arabia that is very strict of the sexuality there, and in the vice versa we can see USA with very kinds, for example, like they're free for the sexuality itself. So means that we can see how the protections of this world. For example, we giving the deterrence impact from support of the society. For example, the rehabilitation and the prevention itself. For the rehabilitations, we can see from the offenders itself, they will feel like, oh my God, this is just like it could be a safe and in many kinds of things, and it will be they will get the deterrence impact, and then also it will decrease in the case of the sexual harassment itself. Meanwhile, vice versa, if we see in the prevention for the one who haven't yet to do any like sexual harassment, they will avoid it. For example, I will avoid this action because it's totally being impacted, not for me, for also for the one who's on the circumstance, right? So that's why it will be anticipation of the potential of the amount of the sexual harassment itself. So that's why we believe we the alternative of this castrated, it will make the stability, and also it will be protect the victims, and also it will be clear on our stance of the law itself. And if we're talking, even if the opposition might be thought about the first one, it's abuse the human right. I think we didn't abuse any human rights, because we think about the sexual offender is they have a victims, and it will be fair if it is we giving the deterrence impact for the immoral action that the offenders is did, right? And in the other hand, if it is they're talking about the stance of the law itself, it's not enough, because convicted to the jail is not enough, because we need the deterrent impact. For example, we should the decreasing the potential of the harassment next on. For that, we proudly to open this case.
I'll start my speech on 3, 2, 1. Panels, every person in this world make a mistake. We all make mistake. The difference is some mistakes are forgivable, while some need to be punished as the way to pay it off. We all agree that the sex offenders wrong. They make a mistake for what they did and should be punished for that. However, we should ask our moral sense, is there any mistake that's so big someone must lose their human rights to live in a way to pay it off? I believe there's no such of things like that. Everyone has the same equal to live their life based on their human right. Whatever wrongness someone's commit, they are still a human, the creation of the God. Whatever and how big it is, they need to have a way to return to the society itself. There is no reason to take their ability to live fully as a human, because it's against their right, and everyone with a moral sense. Castrating sex offenders is not just morally wrong, but it's even worse. So if we look to the perspective, doing sex without the consent of the victim is enough for us to say that the sex offender is wrong. So how could we let someone lose their desire for having sex and have a child with their consent and build a family and fulfill their human basic needs as a way that we acceptable as a punishment in our society? I believe doing wrong for those who make wrong things is a hypocrisy. The only way to do the right thing is if we stand on the righteous and do it in the right way. Panels, the Universal Declaration that human rights has been proposed by the United Nations about the human rights expound to us about the 30 list of the human basic right. The article number 16 conclude that it is a right for a human without any limitation to marry and build a family. Castration happen to take away that right human have, that a right human the person have, in a way that it remove it from someone, in which they would be forcefully lose their ability to have a child. And not only that, it also have an effect to the mechanism of their health itself, in which it makes they experience the long life torture. So how could we make an injustice kind of punishment in which someone that has been changed need to feel the punishment that they have been committed in the past and feel it as a torture for their entire life? In the culture that has been practiced castration before, it shows us the long-term effect of castration. It makes deformities on the physical abilities on a person, in which they cannot live fully as a human being anymore. It decreases their quality of life. So we can agree that in the past era, castration played a crucial role on the older society. But we are the people of modern era should stop this barbaric practice and start fixing problem without making anyone victim. If we look to the case that what has happened, castration in human can fix the problem that relate to sex abuse. It even make the situation worse and bring new challenge for the law enforcement. Castration would attack the psychological part of the person to believe that they have been neglected from the society. It would have eventually increased the feline mind to be their feline mind to be the worst person, because the society doesn't give them any chance to turn back and be a normal human. The only right solution for this problem is if we receive them back to the society as a normal human after their served time has completed. We should approach them psychologically and convince them to never make the same mistake again. As a human, it's fair to say there is always a moral to embrace and a way that the moral sense believe they can be a good person and embrace them to be back to the society and having a place to come back. So stop the cruelty of barbaric punishment, and we should start build a humanist society. And as the opposition side, I'm proud to be.